My name is Linda Carter, I'm 54 years old, born and raised in Ohio. For most of my life, I worked quietly, earned my own money, and kept my $50,000 salary to myself. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I wanted my son, Jacob, to grow up humble, grounded, and hardworking. I grew up in a small town outside Cleveland, where my father worked at the steel mill and my mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. They taught me that money didn't make you better than anyone else, and that the measure of a person was in their character, not their bank account. When I became a mother at 26, those lessons became the foundation of how I raised Jacob. His father left when Jacob was 2. Just packed a bag one Tuesday morning and never came back. I won't pretend it wasn't hard, it was the hardest thing I'd ever been through. But I dusted myself off, enrolled in night classes to get my associate degree, and landed a job as a case manager at the Department of Children and Family Services. The work was emotionally draining, but it paid the bills, offered stability, and gave me a sense of purpose. Over the years, I worked my way up to senior case manager, supervising a team of 7. My salary eventually reached $52,000 a year, but I never felt the need to broadcast it. Jacob grew up in our modest 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street. We didn't have much, but we had enough. I taught him to mow lawns for extra money in summer, to save half of every birthday check from his grandparents, to appreciate what he had. When other kids got new phones every year, Jacob kept his until it stopped working. When he wanted to join the travel soccer team, I told him we'd split the cost if he got a part-time job. He did, working at the local grocery store, and I never told him I could have afforded the full fee. That struggle taught him more than comfort ever could. Our relationship was close, but like any mother and son, it had its complications. As Jacob got older, I noticed him pulling away slightly, maybe embarrassed by our simple life when his friends had bigger houses and fancier cars. He never said it outright, but I could see it in the way he'd ask me to drop him off a block from school, or how he'd change the subject when friends asked about my job. Still, Jacob turned out well. He went to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, studied business, and landed a good job at a marketing firm in Columbus. At 29, he was doing better than I'd ever hoped for him. And then he met Emily. Emily Davis was a kindergarten teacher with strawberry blonde hair and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. She was gentle, patient, and genuinely sweet. When Jacob brought her home for the first time, she complimented my pot roast, helped me with the dishes without being asked, and told me stories about her students with such warmth that I liked her immediately. But then I met her parents. Richard and Karen Davis lived in Dublin, one of Columbus's most affluent suburbs, in a massive brick colonial that looked like something out of a magazine. Richard was a cardiovascular surgeon at Riverside Methodist, and Karen was, as she liked to say, involved in philanthropy, which seemed to mean she planned charity galas and served on nonprofit boards without ever getting her hands dirty with actual work. The wedding was beautiful, held at the Columbus Museum of Art with 200 guests, most of whom I didn't know. I wore my best dress, navy blue from JCPenney, and felt like a sparrow among peacocks. Karen had smiled at me with tight lips, her eyes scanning my outfit with barely concealed judgment. When she learned I worked in social services, she'd patted my hand and said, "How admirable. It takes a special person to work with those kinds of families." Those kinds of families. As if the people I served were somehow beneath her. I'd smiled and said nothing, but something about that interaction lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. Over the following months, through various family gatherings, I noticed more. The way Karen would ask about my little house. The way Richard would explain things to me slowly, as if I wouldn't understand. The subtle condescension wrapped in polite concern. Emily never acted that way. She was genuine and kind, and I could see she truly loved my son. But her parents looked at me like I was a charity case, someone to be pitied rather than respected. And I wondered, was this how they saw everyone who didn't live in their neighborhood, who didn't summer in Martha's Vineyard, who actually worked for a living? Then came the phone call. "Mom, Emily's parents want to host a family dinner," Jacob said, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when he was nervous. "Kind of a formal thing. They're inviting you." "That's nice," I said carefully. "It's this Saturday at 7. Dinner at their place. They're making a whole thing of it. He paused. Just, dress nice. They're kind of particular about stuff like that. Dress nice. As if I didn't know how to dress appropriately. The splinter in my chest dug deeper. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the faded wallpaper I'd been meaning to replace for years. I thought about all the times Karen had looked through me rather than at me. I thought about the way Richard explained the wine at the wedding as if I'd never heard of Chardonnay. I thought about how Jacob had warned me to dress nice, as if he was worried I'd embarrass him. And that's when the idea formed. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to see, without the filter of politeness and social niceties, exactly how these people treated someone they considered beneath them. Someone who had nothing to offer them. Someone they could safely look down on. So I decided to give them exactly what they expected. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood. I stood in my bedroom, looking at the outfit I'd carefully selected. Not my good blazer or the nice slacks I'd bought last year. Instead, I pulled out a faded floral dress that had seen too many wash cycles, the hem slightly frayed. I added an old cardigan with a small moth hole near the shoulder that I'd kept meaning to donate. Scuffed beige flats that were comfortable but worn. I pulled my hair back into a simple ponytail and skipped the makeup except for a touch of lipstick. Looking in the mirror, I saw exactly what I intended, a woman who looked tired, overwhelmed, and struggling. My neighbor Sarah knocked on my door just as I was leaving. She took one look at me and frowned. Linda? Where are you going in that outfit? Dinner at Emily's parents', I said. In that? Her eyebrows shot up. Honey, you look like you're about to scrub floors, not sit down to dinner. That's the point, I said. What are you up to? She asked, knowing me too well. I told her. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to concern. Linda, are you sure about this? What if it backfires? Then at least I'll know the truth, I said. The drive to Dublin took 30 minutes. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained dark and threatening. I drove my 2012 Honda Civic, reliable but showing its age, with a small dent in the passenger door from when I'd misjudged a parking space 2 years ago. I pulled up the long driveway past perfectly manicured lawns and professionally trimmed hedges, parking behind Jacob's much newer Honda Accord. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering my courage. This was it. I was about to walk into that house and play a role I'd never played before, the struggling, simple woman they already assumed I was. Taking a deep breath, I got out and walked to the front door. Karen answered, and I watched her face carefully. Her welcoming smile froze as her eyes traveled from my worn shoes up to my outdated dress and shabby cardigan. For just a second, something flickered across her face. Was it disgust? Pity? Satisfaction at having her assumptions confirmed? Linda, she said, recovering quickly but not quickly enough. Come in, come in. I stepped into the marble-floored foyer, feeling genuinely small in that moment. The house was even more impressive inside, crystal chandelier, curved staircase, artwork that looked original and expensive. Richard appeared from somewhere deeper in the house, a glass of scotch in his hand. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me, and he exchanged a quick glance with Karen that I wasn't supposed to catch. Linda, welcome, he said, his voice overly hearty. Let me take your sweater. Oh, I'll keep it on if that's okay, I said, making my voice a little uncertain. I get cold easily, and this old thing keeps me warm. Of course, Karen said, her smile now firmly in place but not reaching her eyes. Whatever makes you comfortable. She led me through the house, and I could feel her discomfort radiating behind me. We entered a formal dining room where the table was set with china so delicate it looked like it might shatter if you looked at it wrong. Crystal glasses caught the light from another chandelier. Fresh flowers in a centerpiece that probably cost more than my grocery budget for a month. Jacob and Emily were already seated. Emily's face lit up when she saw me. Linda. I'm so glad you're here. She stood and hugged me warmly. Jacob's hug was more reserved, and when he pulled back, I saw concern in his eyes. He took in my outfit, and something shifted in his expression. Embarrassment, worry, I couldn't quite tell. "Hey, Mom," he said. How was the drive?" "Oh, fine," I said, sitting down in the chair Karen indicated. Traffic wasn't too bad. Though I did get a little lost. These fancy neighborhoods all look the same to me. Karen's smile tightened. "Yes, well, GPS can be tricky." "I don't really know how to use all that technology," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "I just sort of drive around until I find where I'm going." This was a lie. I used GPS all the time and was perfectly comfortable with technology. But I watched Karen's expression, saw the flash of superiority. "Well, you made it, that's what matters," Richard said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Linda, can I pour you some wine? This is a 2015 Chateau Margaux. Excellent vintage." I looked at the bottle like I'd never seen wine before. "Oh, I don't know much about wine. Is it like the stuff they sell at the grocery store?" A pause. Richard's hand froze on the bottle. "It's similar," he said carefully. "Though this is from France. Bordeaux region. That's near Paris, right?" I said, purposely mixing up my geography. "Not exactly," Karen said, her voice taking on that slow, patient tone people use with children or the elderly. "Bordeaux is in the southwestern part of France. Paris is in the north." "Oh, geography was never my strong suit," I laughed. "I barely passed high school." Another lie. I'd graduated with honors. Jacob shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand, her face showing nothing but kindness, and I felt a pang of guilt. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. The first course arrived, brought in by a woman Karen introduced as Maria, who helps us with events. It was some kind of salad with arugula, roasted beets, and goat cheese. I picked up the wrong fork deliberately. "Linda, dear," Karen said gently, "the salad fork is the smaller one on the outside." "Oh gosh, I'm sorry," I said, switching forks. "We don't really use different forks at home. One usually does the job." "Of course," Karen said, that pitying smile back in place. "Different households have different customs." As we ate, Karen started asking questions. Each one felt like a tiny probe, poking at what she assumed was my limited life. "Jacob tells us you work in social services. That must be challenging." "Oh, it is," I said. "Lots of paperwork. Filing. Answering phones. That sort of thing." This was technically true but omitted the fact that I managed cases, supervised staff, and had decision-making authority over budgets and program implementation. "And you've been doing that for how long?" "About 25 years now." Richard looked surprised. 25 years? And you never wanted to advance into a management position?" I shrugged, playing with my salad. "I don't know. I'm not really management material, I guess. I like simple work. Nothing too complicated." Jacob's jaw clenched. I could see him struggling with something, the urge to correct me warring with his desire to avoid conflict. "Well, there's dignity in any honest work," Karen said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Not everyone is cut out for leadership or advancement. Some people are just happier in supporting roles." "I suppose so," I said quietly. "And you raised Jacob all by yourself," Richard added. "That couldn't have been easy on a secretary's salary." Secretary. The word stung even though I'd set this up. It was hard, I admitted, and this part was true. There were times I didn't know how we'd make ends meet. I had to be very careful with money. "Of course you did," Karen said sympathetically. "Jacob's lucky he turned out so well despite the circumstances. You must be very proud." "Despite the circumstances. Despite having me as a mother." The main course arrived, filet mignon with some kind of red wine reduction, roasted asparagus, and garlic mashed potatoes. I cut my meat awkwardly, as if I wasn't used to a knife this sharp or meat this tender. This is really fancy, I said. We usually just have hamburger helper or chicken at home. This is a real treat. I'm so glad you're enjoying it, Karen said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. This was confirming everything she'd already believed about me. The conversation continued, and with each minute, Karen's questions became more pointed, her condescension more obvious. She talked about Emily's education at Ohio State, her master's degree, her career. She mentioned their family vacations, the villa in Tuscany, the ski trip to Aspen, the cruise through the Greek islands. Have you ever traveled, Linda? Karen asked. Seen anything beyond Ohio? Oh, I went to Pennsylvania once, I said. And Indiana for a cousin's funeral. How nice, Karen said in a voice that meant the opposite. Travel really does broaden one's horizons. It's important to expose oneself to different cultures, different ways of life. I'm sure, I said. It sounds expensive, though. Well, yes, Richard said. But education and experiences are worth the investment. That's why we made sure both our children could study abroad and see the world. The implication was clear, unlike you, who couldn't give your son those advantages. Emily had gone quiet, her earlier enthusiasm fading. She picked at her food, glancing between her mother and me with increasing distress. You know, Linda, Karen continued, warming to her subject now, I think it's wonderful that you're so accepting of your limitations. Not everyone has ambition, and that's perfectly fine. The world needs people who are content with simpler lives, simpler work. Where would we be without the people who answer phones and file papers? Jacob's fork clattered against his plate. Mom, he said, his voice tight. What? Karen looked at him innocently. I'm just saying there's no shame in Linda's choices. Her choices, Jacob repeated, anger creeping into his voice. Jacob, it's fine, I said softly. Your mother-in-law is right. I've lived a simple life. Very simple, Karen agreed. And there's beauty in that. In fact, Linda, I hope you won't be offended, but Richard and I were discussing how we might help you out financially. Jacob's family now, and we take care of family. If you're struggling with bills or need help with home repairs, Jacob mentioned your house is quite old, we'd be happy to assist. The table went completely silent. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment that would reveal everything. That's very generous, I said quietly. But I'm okay. Are you sure? Karen pressed. Because there's no shame in accepting help when you need it. We know that social service jobs don't pay much, and being a single mother all those years must have left you with very little savings. We wouldn't want you to struggle unnecessarily. Karen, Emily said suddenly, her voice sharp. Stop. What? I'm offering to help. No, you're being cruel, Emily said. You've been cruel all evening, and I can't sit here and watch it anymore. Karen looked genuinely surprised. Emily, I don't know what you mean. I'm trying to help Linda. She clearly needs. She doesn't need anything, Jacob interrupted, his face flushed with anger. And you have no idea what you're talking about. Jacob, don't speak to your mother-in-law that way, Richard said sternly. Why not? Jacob shot back. She's been insulting my mother all night. Acting like she's better than her. Talking down to her. I have not, Karen started. Yes, you have, Emily said firmly. You've been patronizing and condescending, assuming Linda is poor and uneducated, treating her like she's beneath you. Well, I mean, Karen faltered, looking at my outfit, my worn shoes. I was just trying to be kind to someone who obviously struggles financially. There's nothing wrong with that. That's when I decided it was time. I don't struggle financially, I said, my voice calm and clear, dropping the uncertain tone I'd been using all evening. Everyone turned to look at me. I work as a senior case manager for the Department of Children and Family Services, I said, meeting Karen's eyes. I supervise 7 caseworkers, manage complex abuse and neglect cases, coordinate with law enforcement and court systems, and make critical decisions that affect children's lives every day. Karen's mouth fell open slightly. I make $52,000 a year. Not a fortune, but well above the median household income in Ohio. I have full benefits, including excellent health insurance and a pension plan. I've been contributing to my retirement account for 25 years, and it's currently worth about $240,000. Richard had gone very still, his scotch forgotten in his hand. That little house you mentioned? I continued. I bought it for $95,000 27 years ago. I refinanced once at a lower rate and paid it off completely 6 years ago. It's now worth approximately $185,000, and I own it free and clear. No mortgage, no debt. Jacob was staring at me, his eyes wide. I drive a 12-year-old Honda because it's reliable, safe, and paid for. I shop at JCPenney because their clothes last and I see no reason to pay designer prices for the same quality. I didn't travel to Europe because I was saving money, not because I was broke, but because I was being responsible. I paused, letting that sink in. I also have $58,000 in savings and a $25,000 certificate of deposit that matures next year. I put myself through college while working full-time and raising a child alone. I read extensively, everything from Toni Morrison to legal journals to philosophy. I can discuss Bordeaux wine regions, Italian Renaissance art, and the cultural significance of Greek mythology because I educated myself, not because I had the money to tour Europe. The silence was deafening. But tonight, I said, my voice softening, I dressed in my oldest clothes, drove my older car, and pretended to be exactly what you assumed I was, poor, simple, uneducated, struggling. And do you know why? Karen shook her head mutely. Because I wanted to see how you treat people who have nothing to offer you. People you consider beneath you. People who can't contribute to your social standing or match your lifestyle. A tear rolled down Karen's cheek. And I got my answer, I said. You were polite on the surface, but underneath every word was contempt. You pitied me. You felt superior to me. You offered charity not out of genuine kindness, but because it made you feel good about yourselves. You looked at someone you thought was poor and decided that meant they were also simple, limited, less than. Linda, Karen's voice broke. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said gently. That's the problem. You didn't even realize what you were doing because to you, it was normal. Natural. You've spent so long in your bubble of privilege that you've forgotten that a person's worth has nothing to do with their bank account or their zip code or whether they've been to Tuscany. I stood up, and Jacob immediately stood with me. I raised my son on $50,000 a year, I said. I never told him exactly how much I made because I wanted him to learn that money doesn't define you. That how you treat people, all people, regardless of what they have or what they can offer you, is what defines your character. I looked at Emily, who had tears streaming down her face. Emily, you're a beautiful person, inside and out. You've never treated me with anything but kindness and respect, and I'm grateful my son found you. I hope you'll forgive me for putting you through this. There's nothing to forgive, Emily whispered. I'm so sorry. I had no idea they would, I never thought. I know, I said. You couldn't have known because you don't see people that way. I turned back to Karen and Richard. Thank you for dinner. The filet was cooked perfectly, by the way. Medium rare, just the way I like it. And that wine reduction had a beautiful depth. I'm guessing you used the same Margaux. You served with dinner? Karen nodded, unable to speak. Good choice, I said. The flavor profiles complement each other nicely. I walked to the door, and Jacob followed. As we reached the foyer, I heard Karen's voice behind us, small and broken. Linda, please. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was horrible. Please let me apologize properly. I turned back. Karen had followed us, her mascara running, her perfect composure completely shattered. I don't know what to say, she continued. Except that you're right. About all of it. I looked at you and made assumptions based on appearances, and I treated you terribly because of it. That says everything about me and nothing about you. Richard appeared beside her, looking equally shaken. We owe you an apology, Linda. A real one. What we did tonight was inexcusable. Yes, it was, I agreed. But I also owe you honesty. I set this up. I deliberately played a role to test you, and that wasn't entirely fair either. You failed the test, but I shouldn't have given it in the first place. No, Emily said, coming up behind her parents. You had every right to protect yourself. To see the truth. Mom, Dad, you've been judging Linda since the day you met her. I've watched it, and I've made excuses for it, and I shouldn't have. Linda deserved better. Jacob put his arm around my shoulders. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have defended you from the beginning. I should have said something every time they condescended to you. I was too worried about keeping the peace, about not causing waves, and I let them disrespect you. You were trying to navigate a difficult situation, I said. I understand that. But you're my mother, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You raised me, sacrificed for me, taught me everything important. And I was embarrassed of you tonight. Embarrassed of your clothes, worried about what they'd think. What does that say about me? It says you're human, I told him. And that maybe you learned a lesson tonight too. Karen wiped her eyes. Would you consider staying? Please. Let me try again. Let me show you I can be better than this. I looked at her for a long moment. Her distress was real, her shame genuine. But I was tired, emotionally drained from the performance I'd given all evening. Not tonight, I said. I think we all need some time to process this. But Karen, Richard, if you're serious about changing, about seeing people differently, then maybe we can try again. Start over. Be honest with each other. We'd like that, Richard said. Very much. Then let's plan another dinner, I said. At my house next time. Nothing fancy. Just pot roast and mashed potatoes. And I'll wear my good clothes, and we'll all be ourselves. How does that sound? Karen nodded eagerly. That sounds wonderful. 2 weeks later, they came to my house on Maple Street. Karen arrived with flowers and an expression of nervous hope. Richard brought wine, a modest California red that he didn't explain or pontificate about. We sat at my simple kitchen table with its mismatched chairs, ate pot roast and vegetables, and talked. Really talked. Karen told me about growing up poor in rural Kentucky, about her father's coal mining accident, about working her way through community college. About how she'd been so determined to escape poverty that somewhere along the way, she'd started looking down on it instead of remembering where she came from. I became what I used to hate, she said quietly. The person who judges others by their circumstances instead of their character. My mother would be ashamed of me. We talked late into the evening. About class and privilege, about the assumptions we make, about what really matters in life. It wasn't comfortable, and it wasn't always easy, but it was real. As they were leaving, Karen hugged me, a real hug, long and tight. Thank you, she whispered. For the lesson I needed to learn. For being patient enough to teach it. Thank you for being willing to hear it, I said. In the months that followed, something shifted. Karen started volunteering at a women's shelter, working directly with the residents instead of just writing checks from a distance. Richard began offering pro bono legal advice to families in crisis. They weren't perfect, old habits die hard, but they were trying. And Jacob? He started asking me about my work, really listening to the stories I told about the families I helped. He asked about my finances, my retirement plans, my dreams for the future. We talked about the choices I'd made in raising him and why I'd made them. I used to think we were poor, he admitted one day. Not desperately poor, but struggling. I was sometimes embarrassed we didn't have what other kids had. And now? I asked. Now I understand we had something better. We had priorities. Values. A real understanding of what matters. As for me, I still work at the Department of Children and Family Services. I still drive my Honda. I still shop at JCPenney. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Because my worth isn't determined by the car I drive or the labels on my clothes. Last month, I wrote Jacob and Emily a check for $20,000 toward the down payment on their first house. Not because they expected it or asked for it, but because I could. Because I'd worked hard, saved wisely, and earned the right to help my son when it mattered. When Jacob saw the check, he started crying. "Mom, this is too much. Your savings are mine to do with as I choose," I said firmly. "And I choose to invest in my son's future. Just like I've always done." Some people measure success in square footage and European vacations and country club memberships. I measure it differently. In a son who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard. In relationships built on honesty and respect rather than pretense. In the quiet satisfaction of knowing you earned your place in the world through hard work and integrity. I may not have a villa in Tuscany or a summer house in Martha's Vineyard. But I have everything I need. I have my self-respect, my independence, and the knowledge that I raised a good man who knows that a person's worth has nothing to do with their wealth. And honestly, that's worth more than all the Bordeaux in France. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter.